Hello, welcome to TechShare Pro 2021. I'm Mark Walker from AbilityNet. I've got Hector here from Microsoft. We're going to be talking through this keynote segment. You can see we've got some great talks here. Going to do a brief introduction to TechShare Pro. We've got the Minister for Disabled People from the UK to introduce the event. Then we're going to be meeting the Valuable 500. Caroline's joining me for a chat to tell us about their amazing progress this year. Christopher Patnoe is going to be here from Google, talking about why accelerators invest in accessibility and inclusion. And then we've got an amazing panel at the end for you to hear about how businesses are investing in accessibility and inclusion to deliver business advantage. So, packed segment this morning to kick off what is an incredible 3 days for us at AbilityNet. We're really proud of everything we've done, but we couldn't have done it without our sponsors. So firstly, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our sponsors. Gold sponsor Microsoft. We've been working with Hector on this for 12 months or more. So a fantastic amount of work that's gone on in the background in terms of AbilityNet and Microsoft working together. But equally, we've got Barclays, Google, Intuit, Meta and Sony, who've made the event possible through their support, plus a host of others. I'm waiting for the slide to go so I don't leave anybody off. So Attendable, Business Disability Forum, Code Mantra, DAT Europe, Digit Music, IAAP, IT Pro, RNIB, TextHelp, UK, Association for Accessible Formats, and the Valuable 500. All of those organizations you'll meet at some point in the next 3 days are playing an active role in the event and really made the whole thing possible for us at AbilityNet. So there's a keynote segment this morning. There's a keynote segment this afternoon with further top-notch talks from our business leaders for you to join in with. And in between times, there's workshops and sessions for you to join in if you're in the conference platform rather than joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube. So please do make the most of the next 3 days. We're incredibly proud of the mix of events we've pulled together and the people who are contributing. We've done our best to make them as fully accessible as possible. And anybody who's on the platform can join in with the sessions and ask questions and make comments, connect up with one another, and there are networking events specifically set aside for you to just drop in and casually meet up as if you were at a real event. We've done our best to just replicate that whole conference experience. But firstly, Hector, thank you so much for all the work you've done with us over the last 12 months. It's incredible, isn't it? The people we've pulled together, the names that have said yes when we asked.
It's been an absolute pleasure to join you again this year, Mark, and for the partnership with AbilityNet, we really cherish it. And we like to bring who we know, but the reach that you have as an organisation is fantastic. So awesome to partner with you.
Yeah, and we were saying it's the biggest event in Europe now, isn't it? Which is what we said this time last year, is let's see if we can do that. And I really do think we've shown that there's so many people interested in so many areas of accessibility across Europe.
Yep, and our aim at Microsoft is to go global with accessibility. We know that the conversation tends to sit in the same places too much, and so we made a real commitment to each other at the end of last year, like, come on, let's move out. And so I'm deeply grateful to the sponsorship of Microsoft Western Europe. Cindy Rose, the president of Microsoft Western Europe, personally sponsors this event and makes sure that we really turn up and really gives people permission to invest their time in it. You got to know quite a few people
exactly.
from Microsoft over the last year.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, isn't it? Is to drive accessibility as an absolute must-have deliverable through Microsoft.
Well, and I think the reason this session is at the start is because we want the why. We want to draw people into the conversation about why would I get involved in accessibility, particularly people who aren't in the accessibility choir, as we call them, the people who haven't yet got accessibility in their job title or in their job description or in their day-to-day thinking. I want to draw people in. And so this is very much about that. And you mentioned Cindy, she's talking this afternoon in this evening session. But also got Pilar this morning, a senior member of your team in Europe for Microsoft, and others, some amazing names in that session. So we're really trying to put this on the map in terms of saying this is why we're doing it. There's a lot of how to do it during the next 3 days, lots of sessions, practical sessions, lots of sessions to draw together the people who are already active. This first segment's really about why we should get involved.
And I think it's really smart the way you've structured it. The fact that we've got like a keynote to kick off, anybody, really, there's some great speeches to come, great sessions to go for in the morning and in the evening. That's where, honestly, they're the accessible sessions, aren't they? Where anybody who wants to just know more about accessibility can come and learn how leaders are speaking about it. But then in the middle of the day, when it's your day job to deliver on accessibility, you've got sessions where you can go and learn new stuff, get to meet others doing and striving for the same goals as well. So I think it's a perfect way to structure what can be quite a tricky topic for some people to feel like they've got permission to come and talk about. And I think that's what's so nice about the way you've done this.
Brilliant. Cool. And we're going to start with a conversation you had with the Minister of Disabled People, which is fantastic. Again, dipping into your little black book and pulling that out.
Please don't say that. Look, I mean, every country should have a Minister for Disabled People, and not enough countries have a Minister for Disabled People. Now, as we get talking to the Minister, it's really important to recognise the impact and the influence she can have across other parts of government. So when we think about obvious places like health and education, but also digital. You know, we have a digital minister. The digital minister needs to understand the needs of the disability minister. And frankly, that's how we structure accessibility at Microsoft. We have a chief accessibility officer, and then different parts of the organization make commitments to accessibility. Events teams, marketing teams, product development teams, sales officers, marketers. Everybody has a role to play in this digital world in the inclusion of people with disabilities. So I think it's super important that we bring the disability minister to an event like this. This is UK only, but we're reaching out to the rest of Europe, of course, and the US this evening. They'll be joining us later on this evening. So I think it's super important that people recognise that leadership positions committed to the inclusion of people with disabilities, but also recognising that disability ministers have to know what digital means to people with disabilities. So, you know, I don't think it could be any more important. So I don't just view this as somebody coming and talking to us. I view this as somebody coming to learn from us as technologists about how much they have to start learning and adding accessibility and technology to their agenda. So shall we run VT?
The first chance to try that.
Let's run VT.
A nation's strategy on disability inclusion must see partnership between business, the public sector, and government. That's why I'm delighted to be joined this morning by the newly appointed Minister for Disabled People here in the UK, Corie Smith MP. Welcome, Corie.
Hello, and thanks very much for the chance to be with you.
We're delighted you're here, and we're delighted as Microsoft to be hosting this really important event. The UK Disability Strategy sets out a number of ambitions in the role of technology to transform the lives of disabled people. Can you share how you see those building blocks evolving in the next few years?
Well, thanks again for inviting me to join your conference. I think there's an enormous amount to do together, and I'm really pleased to be speaking with you today. Our commitment here is to be able to improve the everyday lives of disabled people. We want to achieve practical changes which tackle barriers and increase opportunity. There's a couple of ways that we'll be doing that, and I want to just pick out a few that are particularly relevant to those listening today. So we published the National Disability Strategy in July this year. This is a truly cross-government strategy that looks at all of the areas that impact people's everyday lives, and of course indeed goes beyond public services to do that fully. We've got 100 immediate commitments supported by £1.6 billion of funding and an ambitious agenda for future reform. In amongst those is a multi-year data programme to improve the availability and the quality and the relevance of information about disability, which will then drive decision making across government. There's two specific commitments on accessible technology. Firstly, to assess the assistive and accessibility technology needs of disabled people in England. We need better data to understand what accessible tech is available, what's being developed, what would best help disabled people to improve their outcomes, reach their potential, make the choices that suit them best. And secondly, then, to explore the establishment of a world-leading centre for assistive and accessible tech. So we're currently working with a range of disabled people's organisations and accessible tech experts to scope out what this looks like, how it could be realised. And then as a final example to give you of what's in this strategy, we're also working beyond it to appoint 5 new disability and access ambassadors. That includes 2 new ambassadors for technology and web accessibility. These are industry leaders who help to drive improvements in the accessibility and quality of services and facilities in their sector for disabled people, both as consumers and employees. We'll be announcing those successful candidates shortly. And I think that's a great team together to be able to try to make a real difference.
It's fantastic. I love hearing you talk about data. You know, when we think about the digital society that we're building, if people with disabilities are not included in that data, then we essentially just routinely build inaccessible experiences. This is a topic that we're really working on hard here at Microsoft. So superb to hear you talking about this. So as well as the broader themes about tech and disability, we're also focusing on workplace and inclusion and confidence. You know, the Disability Confidence Scheme has been an amazing scheme for us to get involved in. What role does the government play in building the confidence of businesses around disability and inclusion?
Well, I'm a big fan of the Disability Confidence Scheme, and it's got a great reach so far. It's covering 20,000 employers, which actually adds up to 11 million employees. So that's a very important contribution, I think, to helping those millions of people to be more confident about disability. But of course, actually, it has to go much further than just confidence on its own. It has to go into real jobs, and that's where a big focus is for me. So we've got of course, the inclusive and multi-billion-pound plan for jobs, which has been helping people through and we hope after the pandemic. And through that, we're helping more disabled job seekers to find and retain and progress in fulfilling work and work that is right for them. That goes with specialist programs, with personal support from our work coaches and disability employment advisors. So the latest figures show that we're making progress in helping disabled people to be in work. But we're committed to reducing the disability employment gap even further. We're also committed to making the goal of 1 million more disabled people in work by 2027. There are things to do within this goal then as well. So, for example, we're consulting later this year on workforce reporting on disability for larger employers. We're also working with many others to develop an access to work passport. Access to work is a great scheme. If there's people listening today who haven't had a chance to have a look at it, it's something that can be transformational in supporting disabled people and their employers in a successful workplace and some of the adjustments that may need to be made. So all these things together, I think, are really important. There are perhaps also things to be said about how else we can help people get good advice. That's coming from the Department for Business and also ACAS. And also the Department for Business is launching a consultation later this year on making flexible working a default, which again is something that can, in some circumstances, be helpful to everybody inclusively, and of course disabled people too within that. Just one point, if I may, on what you were just saying about how important data is. I think the really critical thing here as well is that it's actually in everybody's interests. Disabled people are your customers as well as your employees, and that means there is so much to be gained, frankly, for businesses in making sure that you're using data well. So let me give you a lovely bit of data. The charity Scope found that 75% of disabled people they surveyed felt that business was losing out due to poor and not inclusive design. There is a great prize there, customers as well as employees as well as talent.
Great point. And you also mentioned this flexible work environment that we're all living in right now. This creates a great opportunity for businesses who maybe haven't started their journey around disability hiring to think about how that flexibility allows them to recruit from a much wider talent pool. So now that brings me on to the next question, which is we're going to be showcasing some of the work of the business leaders from the Disability Confidence Scheme as part of TechShare Pro. We'd like to be joined with representatives from Coca-Cola, Korn Ferry, KPMG. What role do you see leading businesses taking in terms of the technology they build for their industry and the experiences they build for their industries in particular?
I think there's a huge role for leadership here. I've already mentioned the role of the ambassadors, actually, who sector by sector have a chance to really make a difference and do what specifically works in those sectors, which I think is also important. I also think, for what it's worth, actually local leadership has a massive role to play here. We can often get to a national picture of success by building it up from local place to local place. So as part of that, and in that context, I think there is something really special as well that business leaders can do. I think there is a way to demonstrate your commitment to talent, as you've just expressed it quite rightly. But there's a way to come together to be able to do ever more on that. So we've got the Business Leaders Group as part of Disability Confident, which is about the senior leading figures in the business community who have that commitment, who are showing that commitment. They're bringing that passion as well as the expertise from their sector to changing behaviour, to changing culture, to encouraging others across their networks and across all communities. I think there's something special to be said as well about being able to show how early adoption works, for example, promoting the benefits of accessible technology and innovative workplace adjustments. All of this can really lead the way, again, in helping all see that there is enormous talent here. So disabled people can come to join our organisations, and also, again, can be the customers of successful organisations.
So a fantastic 3 days lined up. We're going to dig deep on all of the topics around accessibility, the tech, the business leadership, the policy updates. What key takeaway would you offer the audience as we jump into these 3 days of activities?
Well, I would say after the pandemic, we have this a special opportunity to build back better and fairer. Now is the time. Opportunity is for all. Opportunity must be for all. And that's what we're interested in across education, across jobs, across housing, across transport, across how to be opening up opportunities as employees, as customers, as talent. That is what I'm interested in on behalf of disabled people. And there has never been a better time to be inclusive by design. So your chance as part of this conference is to contribute in a way that will become disabled people's opportunity to thrive.
Minister, thank you for your thoughts this morning. We're now going to go into the first sessions for the day. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Hector, for setting that up, and for all the support we've had from Microsoft. So moving on, we're going to talk to Caroline Casey from the Valuable 500. Now, Caroline has been involved in TechShare Pro. I'm hoping she's going to join me on the screen here. Caroline's been involved in TechShare Pro for 3 years. Hi, Caroline. How are you doing?
How are you? I'm just not wearing a catsuit like I did in my first TechShare Pro. But I really wish I was back with you all again.
Well, your unforgettable, I should say, your unforgettable appearance, of course. The Valuable 500, moving from the government policy position, moving into a very different space in terms of the work that Valuable 500 has been doing. So 3 years ago, not quite, but very near the beginning of your journey at the time, I think. A huge shift in that time. Could you tell us a bit about what the Valuable 500 is about for anybody who hasn't come across you, but also equally tell us your big news and the stuff that's happened in the last 6-8 months that you've announced, because that's an astonishing shift, isn't it, in that 3 years since we first met?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for the support from you guys as well. None of this was done on our own. So look, the Valuable 500 was created for several reasons. One is essentially to get the commitment and attention and intention of the world's most influential CEOs to support the business in integrating disability inclusion across their supply chains. We say it was to break the CEO silence and to make sure the CEO is accountable right at the top of the business. And I guess for us was to also to end the inclusion delusion that left disability on outside the inclusion and diversity agenda. And so we know that the choices leaders make creates the cultures. So we decided we wanted to get a collective mass, because not one company or not one CEO was going to drive system change. It's not possible. We needed to create an unstoppable movement, a contagious movement. So we decided, well, we'll go for 500. And little did we know what that meant, because now, as of the 18th of May, in 2 years and 3 months, we built the world's biggest CEO coalition after UN Global Compact on any issue. We are 500 companies. We represent 20 million employees, 41 countries headquartered, 64 sectors, 8 trillion in revenue. And that is astonishing. And our job is unambitiously, it's audacious. We want to activate this community now and drive system change, nothing less than, and spread out and work with everybody who has the same intention as ourselves.
Fantastic. It's unbelievable, isn't it? I remember that something popped into my intro. Just wow, 500. And so, it's important to say they are the 500 biggest companies. So you'll recognise 499 of those names are household names. Every single person in that mix is somebody doing something on a global scale of some huge sort of importance to their employees and their supply chain. That big network that you've created is huge and an incredible scale. So the obvious question then is, what's next? You've got the 500, you stop, you go home, finish off, all job done?
No,
not.
Mark, I honestly thought that I was going to be retiring and going off to Mauritius when I got there, but no. Listen, come on, when you get something like this extraordinary community, and think of the power of the supply chains, the customers, the employees, and all of that together, what can you do with this power of a collective? So we asked the community. So to join the community, they had to make a leadership commitment, which we are auditing, by the way. And the results of that audit, to make sure that everybody is accountable, will be out in January of next year. But that was just to get in. And now we are going to look at a transformation program across some of the key barriers that business are saying are getting in the way of system change. And that's around the culture of the business, the comfortableness of the C-suite in it, the customer experience, the gaps in reporting and research, and really trying to drive change around representation. And if you could imagine getting 500 companies each to do something, like that was amazing, right? But imagine getting 500 companies and their businesses and their CEOs to work together in their own way to drive system change. And that's where I think the tipping point can happen, because nobody can do it on their own. And by the way, we're not just even doing it on our own as the Valuable 500. We're aligning ourselves with other movements and other campaigns so that we're not competing with each other, but collaborating into a movement that is just unstoppable. And I think this moment in time is the moment for that collective, that moment to collaborate when we know that we can only do it together. And so I think that's probably our greatest power, is this collective unit. It's like a murmuration of starlings in the sky moving in one direction and hopefully driving that change.
Nice, I like that. I like that analogy. And so if we looked ahead to a year's time, in terms of that probably feels short term, even now that you've reached this place, you're starting to look so much bigger. In the next year, what sorts of changes will we see in terms of how the Valuable 500 engages with its members, and what sort of activities are you hoping that they're going to be undertaking to demonstrate their commitment?
Well, so a lot of our Valuable 500 companies have reached the commitment that they had to already sign up, and they're sort of growing their strategies now. That's the exciting part. And we're not in the Valuable 500 consultants. So what we do is we signpost to all of the disability business experts around the world, just kind of rising the tide for everyone. So that's the first thing to do, to keep encouraging our businesses to move forward. The second is around that transformation plan that I just spoke to you about, is we are co-creating solutions around those 6 areas with disability partners and with 14 iconic companies. And that is companies, some of the biggest names in the world, many of them which are sponsors here today. I'm not going to name one just in case I lose somebody out. And those are creating these solutions. We're going to be testing them with our iconic companies. When they are fit for purpose, then we scale them amongst our 500 companies. And then hopefully in 2024, we release them out to the rest of the world. And so that's the process of change. And amongst all of that, then we campaign, like we will continue to campaign. We identify the best in class, the greatest innovations, and we challenge. I mean, that's what we're here to do, is to challenge and support each other. But I hope by this time next year, you will have at least 4 of our iconic solutions out in the marketplace, which would be incredible.
And I mean, I think that you mentioned that the connections with the other movements. I think there is a groundswell, particularly around disability and inclusion, as an element of inclusion. And you mentioned that you're connecting that with them. Can you just say briefly what's happening there? Because I think a lot of us in the community are hoping that there's a more of a coming together and a bigger voice from that connecting up.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting is when the Valuable 500 joined up with We the 15, and we start talking about global system supergroups, where we're starting to each help each other, whether it's change through sport, change through pop culture, change through business, change through policy. What we're doing now is we're bringing each other together, whether it's billion strong. You've just heard your minister speaking. It's now we need to start joining the dots, right? How do we help each other? How do we grow and learn together? And I think this is the time that we realize, listen, this can't be resolved. The exclusion of people with disabilities, accessibility can't be designed just by governments and policies alone. It needs all of us in all of our sectors to move together in our different ways, but in the same direction. And I think that's what's exciting, bringing these kind of mass movements together to create a full global kind of collective of change, where we can all participate regardless of what our expertise is or our passion or our level. We're allies for each other.
Fantastic. Well, perfect. And I think that, you know, looking back over 3 years, you've been an unbelievable ambassador just in terms of that passion and that connecting up and the joining the dots. It's practical and day to day. It's not just big visions. It's actually getting out there doing so. Thank you and congratulations so much. It's been fantastic to see the journey, and I really am looking forward to coming back next year and finding out seeing those iconics, because I know who they are, obviously, so I know something about what's in there.
Yes.
They just look fantastic. So we're going to play a short video, but thank you so much for joining us this morning, Caroline, and fantastic work. So congratulations for the success so far, and keep it up.
Thanks a million, Mark.
Thank you.
Today, the Valuable 500 announces the 13 iconic leaders. They will play a fundamental role in rebuilding the business system to be more inclusive of people with disabilities. Here's what these global CEOs had to say about why driving the Valuable 500 agenda is so important to them. Dana Strong, Sky CEO.
As a person and as a leader, I wanted to make this commitment to help drive real change for people with disabilities. I want to help raise awareness and build advocacy to such an extent that disability inclusion becomes an essential part of every business. I believe we can create a level playing field for people with disabilities through inclusive products and services, and using our voice at Sky to drive positive change in society.
Carmine DeCibio, EY CEO.
The Valuable 500 is so important because it's convening 500 companies with the mission on inclusiveness, and in particular inclusiveness around disabilities. It's incredibly important that we will have 500 companies involved from different sectors, from different areas around the world, so we could all learn.
Hans Vestberg, Verizon CEO.
I believe the Valuable 500 is important because joining forces with other like-minded organizations will have a greater impact on driving and advancing disability inclusion. That's why we're proud to join the Valuable 500 to build a more connective, inclusive and equitable world.
Tim Davey, BBC Director General.
I believe the Valuable 500 is important because, quite simply, as businesses, as societies, we're not moving fast enough. There's a lot we can do as leaders within our own organisations, but there's so much more we can do together. My hope for the future of disability inclusion is a culture in which disabled people face no barriers, no obstacles to pursuing their career goals.
Kenshiro Yoshida, Sony Group CEO.
I made this commitment because I want the world to be inclusive. I believe fostering diverse human resources, inclusive of people with disabilities, will lead us to contribute to a healthy and sustainable society in the long run.
David Taylor, Procter & Gamble CEO.
The Valuable 500 is important because building an accessible and inclusive environment for all is not something any one company can achieve alone. My hope is to create a more accessible world through inclusive products, packaging, advertising, and environments where all people will feel included and valued.
David Schwimmer, LSEG CEO.
The Valuable 500 is important because disability just hasn't gotten the kind of attention and focus that it should have when it affects 17% of the world's population. Society's been making progress on race or ethnic issues. Society's been making progress on gender issues, but we haven't had the kind of focus on really improving inclusion for those with disabilities.
Sharon Thorne, Deloitte Global Board Chair.
Fairness and equity have been very important to me since childhood. I also believe that in order for organisations to access the best talent, they have to remove barriers, have to make people feel that they belong and are able to be themselves and participate fully.
Oliver Beta, Allianz CEO.
As a business leader, I would like to make this personal commitment because I really believe in diversity as an opportunity. I hope that the future of disability inclusion highlights one important point, that we don't talk about what people cannot do, but we talk about what we can do.
Anish Shah, MD and CEO, Mahindra Group.
My hope for the future is about ability and disability diversity, building and nurturing capabilities without any bias, to truly becoming inclusive, to recognize that we have ability and disability within all of us, to realize that we're human first, and to support each other to rise.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you to everybody at Valuable 500. That campaign is unbelievable. You can see the global nature of it, the senior nature of it, all of that buy-in that they're getting. It's really going to bring change, and we can see that change happening. And I think it's important to say that when we were planning TechShare Pro, we were talking about how change happens. How do you get from the ideas that we have about making websites accessible is one thing, but that culture change, as an organization, want to build accessibility in from the start. What's that default setting that we want accessibility to be switched on from the start, inclusive design to be a natural part of all the processes that we work on, and so many people who join the conference work on day in, day out. And it comes, I think, from a culture change from the top down in that case, in terms of the change of CEOs asking for this to be done for them, but to be done within their organizations. So it's incredible to see the success, and obviously very exciting to see the next stages, and I hope that you in the community who are joining us in the conference feel part of that and can see some of the changes you can make around you because of that. So now we're going to change tack direction slightly. Christopher, hi, how you doing?
Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And so Christopher from Google, who hosted us 3 years ago, and is now living in London, so joining us in the studio. You're going to talk about innovation, I think, and the way that innovation will come in terms of inclusion and design. Can you tell us a bit about who you've been talking to and what sort of topics you're going to cover?
So one of the interesting things for me is where does innovation come from? I mean, working at a company like Google, we're known for innovation, but we are a big company, and innovation becomes part of what we do. But I think the most powerful ones, the ones that really impact people the most, are the small companies, the small businesses that identify a need and build a solution. So over the past year, I've been talking with startups and accelerators to try to understand what technology are they building, how are they building it, why are they building it, and I wanted to invite 3 people that I respect very deeply to come and talk with us about their experiences running accelerators of startups. So it's not just a startup, but it's a group of them coming together to help each other to accelerate the work that they're doing, and they're part of a larger sort of super accelerator called Plus N. So I'm going to stop talking and we'll let them do the work.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our conversation on accelerators and startups focused on building technology for people with disabilities. I am pleased to introduce 2 friends of mine who are doing a really important work, Prateek Madhav and Varun Chandak. I don't want to say anything about them, so I'll let each of you introduce yourselves, and then we'll get on with our conversation. And moving alphabetically, Prateek, you're up first.
Great, thank you, Chris, and great to meet you again, and Varun, great to be a part of this discussion along with you. So my name is Prateek Madhav. I'm based out of Bangalore, India. I founded an organization called AssisTech Foundation. It's a nonprofit. Our interest is in helping innovators and startups who are building technology solutions for people with disabilities in India. We are India's first ecosystem of this sort. Over the years, we've been able to make a network of 350 startups and innovators in India. And as a part of our portfolio, we have 21 of them whom we work very, very closely. And I'm happy to share that our mission really is to impact 2 million people with disabilities in India. We're already, in past few years, have been able to impact 230,000 people. And we are on our way to really scale up our programs and reach out to many, many more people. So thank you so much, Chris, again, for inviting me.
Thank you, Prateek. Varun, would you please introduce yourself and your organization?
For sure, Chris. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here today. So hi, everyone. My name is Varun Chandak, and I'm the founder of ATS Labs, which is Canada's first accelerator for accessibility, mental health, and agent tech startups. We just concluded our first 3-month cohort earlier this month, which saw 10 accessibility and agent tech startups participate in 45 speaker sessions hosted by 50 speakers from 7 countries. And what we do is provide unique programming that is hyper-tailored for accessibility startups and answer those unique questions that only accessibility startups have that are very difficult to get answered elsewhere. Our goal ultimately is to help these startups scale and get to a sustainable point.
Thank you, Varun. Well, moving off of that, let me just start with the core question. Why invest in disability and accessibility startups? Varun, you were just talking about this and wanting to scale them. What's the business case? Why would someone do this?
So the first and easiest answer is it's very, very much needed. People with disabilities is, if you think of it, people with disabilities as a market, it's one of the largest untapped markets left in the world. Research has shown that people with disabilities and their friends and family control purchasing power, which is equal to the size of a market the size of China. Now, if that's not enough, if the impact component of that is not enough of itself, the truth is that accessibility benefits everyone. Disability might affect everyone, and accessibility benefits everyone. What that means is if you think of products like Velcro straps, electric toothbrushes, subtitles and live captioning, emails, in fact, all of these products were initially created as accessibility products. They ended up being very successful in the mass market because of their potential for use. That's what accessibility does. So that's what we're trying to do as well, in that we're teaching our startups how to be deliberate about the potential for mass market adoption and therefore be very scalable. So if you think about why do you want to invest in accessibility startups, you think about why do you want to invest in a massively scalable consumer product. It's the same answer. Obviously, there are B2B startups as well, and there's a ton of value there as well because digital accessibility, for instance, is coming into the fold. In Canada, we have the Accessible Canada Act, and more locally, we have the Local Ontario Act, the AODA, and now that these acts are coming into force, every business needs to have their online presence be accessible, which means that products and companies and startups that serve that purpose have a ton of scaling potential. And that's why there's an immense business case for investing in accessibility startups.
Thank you, Varun. Prateek, how about for you in India? Why focusing on disability startups?
Well, Chris, just extending to what Varun just said, I just want to add on a few numbers. We are talking about 1 billion people with disability in the world, which essentially is 1 in 7 of us has some of the other kind of disabilities. But I don't see this as an issue or a challenge or a problem. If you really take a lens of economic benefit, like Varun said, people with disabilities, if we enable them, it benefits the whole society. In fact, from number perspective, we're talking about 1 billion people with disability representing US $8 trillion disposable income, which essentially means they're the 3rd largest economic power in the world, way above Japan, Germany, and United Kingdom, right? How big is that? Now in India, to your question, we are talking about if we leave people with disability, and by some estimate, we have 70 to 80 million people with disabilities in India. It's such a large population again. And if we leave them out of economy, we're actually losing 5 to 7% of GDP. And hence, any organization, any startup which is building and empowering people with disabilities, it becomes so important because of the market, because of the size of the problem they are trying to solve. Yeah. So that's one. But when we think about this section of society, we are just not talking about economic benefit. It goes way above and beyond it, right? We are talking about communities which are inclusive. We're talking about, inclusive health, inclusive education. In ATF, we talk about 3 L's of impact. The first L is the learning, which is the education. Second L is the livelihood, which is the employment part. And third L is living, which is really living with dignity, living with independence. So I think it's just not the economic, but more it goes above and beyond. And the last point is, Chris, and I'm sure Varun will agree with that, is we are living in a digital world. We are living in a world which is empowered by technology. Look at the way we shop today. Look at the way we bank today. Look at the way we move around. Why not use the same technology, which is as brilliant, has impacted all our lives, to really take a newer point of view and impact lives of people with disability, which is such a large section of the society. So I think it makes so much sense, not just economically, but otherwise as well.
Thank you. that makes sense for a startup, but you guys, both of you are not just startups, you actually have funded accelerators. Prateek, could you just talk about your accelerator, what an accelerator brings to the process, and then maybe say a few words about Plus N?
Sure. So when I started thinking and talking to a lot of people to help these innovators in assistive technology, I started realizing, Chris, that the whole ecosystem in India and beyond was very fragmented. Now, for us, see, startup founders are brilliant people who are very passionate to solve such large problem, but they are very resource crunched, right? I mean, they don't have all the resources at their disposal to solve that large problem, and hence you need an ecosystem. What we are able to do at ATF, in India, is to really create an ecosystem around them. So, for example, we work with government to influence the policies around the startups in assistive technology, policies around the disability. We work with large disability community, the non-profit world, where all these startups are able to pilot their product. They get the user feedback, which is so important, early in the life of a startup. We also work with corporates. And again, corporate is a multi-dimensional relationship, which probably startup wouldn't have access to it otherwise, because we are talking about not just the funding, which is the CSR, but also the tech and the leadership mentoring. Because some of these folks are very, very new. They haven't worked ever. So for them to really build an organization which is not just a building product, but also sustainable, profitable, you need a lot of tech and the business mentoring as well. And hence, just to sum up, we have been able to build the ecosystem around these startups and provide them so many resources, by which, and I'm so happy to share that many of them in our portfolio who came as just idea or just a alpha beta product, they are now able to not only sell the product, but they are actually impacting lives of hundreds and thousands of people, right? And that's something which gives us joy, that gives us happiness, because that really is the mission of ATF. Now coming to Plus N, we saw this fragmentation, in the market of in the field of investors. We saw fragmentation in innovation in AT, not just in India and beyond as well. And hence, all of us have gotten together and formed this whole, alliance, which we're calling it Plus N, Inclusive Innovation Network, essentially to consolidate our effort to support entrepreneurs, bring in more investors to support this community of innovators in assistive technology. We're so happy, that we are able to join hands and really able to solve problems which probably each of us wouldn't have been able to, solve otherwise. But Varun, please feel free to add. There's so much exciting stuff that's happening at present. Please feel free to add more about it.
No, absolutely, it is very, very exciting, and it's exactly what Prateek was saying, that it's about addressing that fragmentation. To give you a very obvious example, I think just 2 weeks ago, because of the Plus N network, I was able to make an introduction for a startup founder in Belgium to a founder in India. The Belgian founder was in my network, the Indian founder was in Prateek's network, and that wouldn't have happened if Plus N didn't exist. It would be really difficult for that to happen. So we are just combining all of these resources and all of these networks that we've put together to address disability and accessibility at a global scale. For us, Chris, to answer your first question about accelerators, for us, it was really about addressing what startup founders were telling us they need. We'd been doing some work in the accessibility and inclusive design space for a few years, and we came across a lot of founders in this space through our work. And those founders told us that despite the tremendous amount of support available in Canada, where I'm based out of, for startups and tech startups in particular, the needs of accessibility startups, aging tech startups, mental health startups weren't always necessarily getting addressed. To give a very simple example, the simple question, how do you market a product for people with disabilities? There's a lot of subtext, nuance in that question, which not all startup support programs may be equipped to answer. So what we ended up doing was we brought together people who had been in the shoes of our founders. So out of the 50 speakers that we had, for example, in this year's cohort, about 25 were C-level leaders of later stage accessibility startups from around the world. These are actual accessibility startups that have raised millions of dollars of funding. Some had in fact exited, and they were able to share what they did right as well as wrong. We also brought together inclusive design leaders such as yourself, and thank you again for participating in our program. So we were able to bring together those inclusive design leaders from around the world who were working on, in a way, cutting edge approach to innovation in the disability space and apply that deliberately at the earlier stages of their scaling. So the idea is, again, to give these founders the tools, resources, the visibility, and hopefully later on, funding that they need to get ready for scale.
Thank you, Varun. So if I could summarize what we've talked about, the reason we would invest in disability startups is because the potential is huge, up to $8 trillion, which is a considerable amount of money, but it's also there to help people. The accelerators bring people together for common benefits, for common goals, and something like Plus N is sort of an accelerator of accelerators, really combining and broadening the networks, making it possible to be successful in terms of these startups and these technologies. Well, our conversation today is in two parts. The first part is this pre-recorded section. I'll save the next question for us to talk about in real life. So thank you, Prateek. Thank you, Varun, for joining us early, and we'll see you in real life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
That's fantastic. And so we're joined now by the panel and Christopher. But I think before we get going, the obvious connection there is that global picture we had with Caroline, all those big 500 companies, and now down to the where the startup innovation is happening, and that came out so well in that conversation there. And I know that's what you want to talk to these guys a little bit more about, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, it's deeply interesting why people start up a disability-focused business. People don't go into accessibility to make a ton of money. It's a mission, it's heart, but you can build a business around it, and how we do this is really important. And so before we get started, I wanted to introduce Bernard Chiira, who wasn't able to join us on the call earlier. So Bernard, please introduce yourself, your work with Innovate now, and then we'll ask some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So hello, everyone. My name is Bernard Chiira. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I am the director of Innovate Now. Innovate Now is Africa's first assistive technology accelerator. It's powered by the Global Disability Innovation Hub out of the UK, and it's implemented in partnership with AmRef Health Africa. So I have a huge passion for this work that I do because of my own personal experience with disability, but also because for the last 8 years or so, I've spent my professional life working closely with startups and helping drive innovation in other industries, and now we are doing it in the disability space. So it's pretty exciting for me.
But let me ask you one question, then move into a larger conversation. What are some of the challenges for disability startups in Africa?
Yeah, so I mean, the way you want to look at this is through a startup ecosystem lens. And then the question becomes, what does it take to create, a thriving startup ecosystem or successful companies? And there's some common factors here. So one is obviously access to investment capital. And I'm going to insist on investment because most of the time when it comes to issues related to disability, people want to look at it through a charity lens. And startups in this field are building new industries just like startups in other fields. So they need access to angel investment, venture capital, impact investment to help them scale. And obviously, I mean, talent, everyone needs talent to build great companies. So 80 startups in Africa, it's a pretty new industry to talk about talent. And there's a lot of engineering talent demand, for example. There's a lot of design talent that is needed. And of course, it's I look at this sector as a very interesting market because it's a global problem that is locally relevant. So one of the things we've seen is, this need to connect our startups to the global ecosystem, and that's why Plus N, for example, is a very interesting network for us.
Thank you, Bernard. So Plus N has sites in Africa, in India, Canada, and Australia, but no one in Europe. How could someone speak about how would an accelerator, or how would startups want to join Plus N and create a European footprint for Plus N? Prateek, could you answer this?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so joining Plus N is pretty easy. You can go to our website and send out a message, and we'll be happy to welcome you. But it's not just that there is no representation of Europe. We closely work with disability, focus initiatives out there, and there are a lot of startups, in fact, since we've launched Plus N, who have been approaching us, and there's a phenomenal amount of innovation that's happening in Europe. So I think as we go forward, I think we're pretty excited about the corporations in Europe who are so inclusive in their approach and the partnerships with them as well.
Thank you. Moving on to Varun, let me ask you. I had the pleasure of speaking to one of your classes a couple of months ago. And you've done this for a while. Are there any sort of success stories that you're particularly proud of, or any really exciting things that you see coming up soon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to community, to be honest. When we first started doing this, and some of the people here on this conference right now know this, the biggest challenge that I had in mind was building a sense of community among the entrepreneurs and this entire network. It was critically important because this ecosystem in Canada, let's say, is just starting out. There's very few groups of people who are looking out for the commercial accessibility innovation ecosystem here in Canada. So when we started out, we wanted to make sure that people, after they come out of this program, have a sense of belonging, they have a sense of community among each other, they almost have a sense of fondness for each other. And the biggest thing, to be honest, that I'm proud of is that we were able to do that. Now we have that sense of community not just among the startups that went through the ADS Labs program. They help each other out. They always are talking to each other without us necessarily being in the room. But that same sense of community, we're seeing that happen at the global level also with Plus N. Prateek, Bernard, the people in Australia and New Zealand, they're always looking out. We're all always looking out for each other, which is what I feel is going to be almost a catalyst in really kickstarting and supporting this new wave of commercial innovation and accessibility across the world. That one really always makes me happy whenever I think about it.
All right, so I'm not going to try to ask parents to choose which of their children is the most favorite. That's probably a bad thing to do. So, Bernard, is there a technology that you find that people are being drawn to? Is it digital technology? Is it physical technology? Where do you see people in Kenya focusing their time and attention?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And that's a pretty important question because, when we launched Innovate Now, we were a bit nervous because, first of all, it was the first of its kind as an accelerator supporting, inclusive tech. So we didn't know what we will find, but we have been pleasantly surprised, to find that, Kenyans, Africans have been already working on very diverse technologies. And they range from AI that helps, persons who are deaf connect better with non-deaf people. We've seen something very interesting in the renewable energy space where for the very first time, there is personal electric vehicles for persons with disabilities being built out of Nairobi. And why this is interesting for me is a lot of the times when we talk about emerging technologies or very new technologies, we don't see the immediate application of these technologies to solve current problems, at least in some markets. but I think it's a myth that needs to be, busted, that right here in Africa and across, Asia and many developing countries, you have entrepreneurs that are leveraging on some of the latest technologies to solve some of the most difficult problems in society, including issues to do with accessibility, both digitally and physically. So I'm pretty excited about the applications of these technologies, and I think it's gonna open up new industries in Kenya and in Africa.
Thank you, Bernard. Prateek, may I ask the same question of you? Is there a particular area, like digital, physical, or something else, where people are aggregating in terms of business ideas and startups?
Well, Chris, if you see the Indian as an economic, India as a society, India as a business landscape, or Indians as a consumer, we have truly transformed the lives of people using technology, right? The way we bank today, the way we shop today, right? The way we collaborate today is purely digital today. And I've always wondered, in those years, that while we are using the latest and the greatest technology to help the businesses, why not use the same tech to help people with disabilities, right? And I'm so glad that in last 4 to 5 years, I've seen emergence of tech entrepreneurs using artificial intelligence, AR, VR, computer vision, all that to help people with disabilities. So I'm so excited. A lot of them truly come out of their personal experiences. Somebody who was met in an accident and is on wheelchair. Somebody who became blind due to some disease. But I think what we are seeing is emergence of tech entrepreneurship in disability. Now, as India, we are the third largest innovation ecosystem. Last 15 years, if you see the number of startups, which are founded, are amazing. Only this year, we have seen 33 startups who have, who are unicorns, right? And I think there's so much excitement. We got to latch onto that. We got to really build and use some of the energy and the excitement in the whole innovation ecosystem. And I think the success is really using and leveraging that excitement to help people with disabilities as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Fantastic. Well, honestly, this is brilliant. I think that I was thinking back over 5 years when we first started TechShare Pro. We had a room, loads of people came together, sat around in a room together, talked together. This is suddenly bust right out. The myths you were talking about, Bernard, about busting some of those myths about the nature of where the innovation's coming from, the figures you just threw in there, Prateek, about the number of unicorns. This is a global movement. Back to Caroline's point about trying to make this a global story, but equally, the global movement, bottom up, the innovation, the startups pulling together is fantastic. And I think it's added a huge ingredient to this year's story for us with TechShare Pro, to be kicking off with you guys bringing this other perspective in. That's what I've had for the last 10, 15 minutes, just looking in thinking, we've got to try and connect up. We've got to try and find those connections across the planet, not just within our own local communities. So a fantastic insight. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us that perspective to kick off the next 3 days of activity. So thank you, and thank you for Christopher for organising that and pulling it all together. I look forward to connecting up with you again and maybe seeing you in Kenya, for example, and joining the other networks that you're part of.
Thanks all very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, folks.
Thank you, and thank you, Christopher, for pulling that together. I know that that's a particular passion of yours, is to make that stuff come together, and it's brilliant to see it. And as I say, from a global point of view, I think we've kicked it off in the biggest picture we could, haven't we? Really, TechShare Pro's gone from the Valuable 500 to a network of entrepreneurs, startups, bottom up. The final segment we're going into is a conversation between some business leaders from big companies who met to talk about where inclusion fits in their business, why they're investing in it, and some of their own personal perspectives about the way that culture of an organization can change. I think it's important, just looking back over the last couple of segments, the change will come from within an organization, and we talk about culture change. It's not a simple thing, it's intangible. It comes from people within an organization doing things differently, and I think this next segment is great for that. It really talks in practical terms about how some of the big organizations are taking on this change and trying to evolve in terms of inclusion, particularly for disabled people in terms of employment. So take it away on the VT.
Hello everyone, I am absolutely delighted to be back here at TechShare Pro this year, and I am especially thrilled to be joined by an all-female panel, which is just so exciting. We have Pilar Lopez, who is COO of Microsoft Western Europe, Alisa Choong, SVP and CIO Information and Digital Services and Operations at Shell, and Cristina Ghetti, Head of Workforce 360 and Nearshore IT Hubs at Nestle. So welcome, one and all. A little bit about me very quickly. I am Corie Brown. I work for Channel 4 Television as a continuity announcer. I'm also co-chair of our Disability Staff Network for Purple. So that's me. Now, last year was an amazing moment at TechShare Pro because for the first time we gathered some senior executives together, and it was a real highlight of the conference, actively demonstrating to the business community that business leaders have got accessibility and disability inclusion on their agendas. So this year we're building on that conversation with these three senior leaders who I hope are going to be able to help us all dive a little bit deeper into the impact of the pandemic on hybrid working and the role that executives play in creative, inclusive organizations, and how we measure the business benefits and impact of including people with disabilities in our organizations. So, ladies, let's dive straight into this. We're going to talk about your ambition for change and progress on accessibility. But before we get there, I'd really love to hear about the experiences that have shaped your passion and your commitment to disability inclusion. You know, for me, this is really deeply personal because I have a severe sight impairment, as do all the members of my immediate family. So, you know, I know the real value in being enabled and empowered and included. And I also know how it does feel when you're not included. So how about you? You know, what drives your commitment and passion for disability inclusion? If you could each speak to that for a couple of moments and introduce yourselves. Pilar, should we start with you?
Hi, Corie, and hi, everyone. Pilar Lopez, I lead sales, marketing, and operations for Microsoft in Western Europe. Super honored to be with you today, bringing disability and accessibility as a business advantage to the leaders community. And yes, accessibility is one of my passions and one of the things I love most about technology. And that has to do with Microsoft mission and how the Microsoft mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more means empowering people with any type of disability. Obviously, it has to do with our culture, and the mission begins with our people and our culture and how we create a culture of inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is at the heart of the culture, and it has to do with building, as I say, a more inclusive company and products and services that are accessible by design. And over the last few years, I did a lot of work with ONCE in Spain. ONCE is one of the largest organizations to empower blind people across the planet. And I saw firsthand how technology could improve people's lives, and especially people with disabilities. And that just got me to be an ally and to be sponsoring accessibility in Microsoft Western Europe right now, for example.
That's really amazing to hear. Really amazing. Thank you for that. Alisa, let's come to you next.
Thank you. It's really a privilege to be here. And basically, this is a subject that is very dear to my heart. My brother, who is about 5 years older than me, had a life-changing experience on his last year of university. He basically was studying mechanical engineer, and he got into an accident. As a result, he lost his right arm. So he couldn't pursue what he was doing. He has to change his career. And of course, 40 years ago, having a disability is almost like saying that you don't have the brains that goes with it. So, living in Asia is also rather different because it's almost like could be quite a stigma on that. So it has been a personal ambition to make sure that there's equality for everyone that has a disability in any jobs that I've gone into. And as I grow in age, sadly, my disability is basically my visual impairment has just got worse. Yeah, and I'm now living with glaucoma, and that has also been now narrowing what I can see and what I can't see. I want to be sitting in one of the world's most diverse and inclusive organization. That's what Shell wants to do. We have got operations over 70 over countries. So we hire a lot of people, and as a result of that, we include quite a lot of health benefits and pension. On top of that, every day in our forecourts, we serve millions of customers. So we got to make our products and services available for all these customers as well. Yeah, and what we also found is that when we make accessibility visible and accessible, sometimes people who don't have the accessibility or the disability we at first target for can also use it for other benefit, and I will be able to share an example of one of those.
Yes, that'd be great to hear about that a little bit later on. Thank you so much. Cristina, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you. So, Cristina Ghetti, I'm working in Nestle, taking care of what is called Workforce 360 organization and our IT hubs in Barcelona and Milan. For me, I would say the aha moments, and I would say moments on the passion around accessibility have been one personal. I had a major surgery a few years ago, and I ended up on crutches for several months, and I found myself terrified from the utter disattention of the people around me. I felt vulnerable, I felt exposed, and I got fear, and I realized how many times I've been the one not paying attention on the world around me, how many times I've been the one more interested on what was going on my mobile than on the people around me. So I took a point in, starting to pay attention to the world around me with a different and maybe more vulnerable eyes. And the other one was a professional moment. I had an incredibly talented person in my team with in the spectrum of Asperger's syndrome, and in conversation with her, it turned out that the noise in the office was impacting her ability to work, and that the devices we were providing were not good enough. So we decided to give her a better headset with higher quality noise reduction, and the world changed for this person in my team. And for me, it was a realization moment that you don't need a massive plan, but you need attention to the single individual, because we all have maybe a moment or a personal situation or a permanent disability, and it doesn't take that much. Maybe it's really just a headset that can make a massive difference for someone. So that triggered this passion and attention, and I'm absolutely delighted to be together with Alisa and Pilar today for this discussion.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Cristina. That's really, really powerful. Really, really powerful. Should we talk about COVID first? Because I think it would be impossible to sit here and not talk about the impact of COVID that it's had for all of us. So I guess my question is, how has the pandemic and hybrid working impacted the way you look at accessibility and inclusion in your organizations and in your teams? Cristina, can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, absolutely an important topic. It has changed everything. I think, we got to know more of each other in the course of these past months. Your house, your cats, your dogs. Nobody blinks anymore if you hear children screaming on the background, because that's truly the type of life we have been living. And in this sense, the need for being more inclusive in the way we work together and in the way we interact has become a matter of life or death, in a sense, because it has become the essential for everybody to keep working and to keep feel included in the organization. I mean, have you checked on the introverts in your team? Have you realized how important it is to be very conscious and very humanly driven in working together. And in this sense, I think technology has saved the day because it gave us the possibility of remaining connected. But I think it's also critical for us to realize that it requires a deliberate effort, and it requires the ability to put yourself on the spotlight as a leader, as an individual, and bring your own human element into that. So in this sense, I think we have a responsibility to drive this change. And now that we are all thinking about what this new hybrid work will really mean, I think it's important to be sure that in doing that, not only we put technology at the center of what we do, because it's a key enabler, but we truly do it by making it accessible by design and not having to think about what accessibility means as a afterthought. We have a unique opportunity, and I think in this sense, we have the possibility of making it right from the very start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your points about the whole humanizing effect of COVID and the way that we've all been working remotely it certainly resonates very deeply with me for sure. Alisa, when you think about all this, the hybrid situation, share some of your thoughts.
I think basically hybrid working and in the future of work, continuous hybrid working and COVID basically accelerated our journey in accessibility. Yeah. So for example, when I was first working from home, it was lovely. Then it became so tiring in the mind that always having to look at the camera, having always to look at the screen on that basis. So we rolled out MS Teams, and we have our shell-operated webcast, and we actually provide caption in 28 languages. And it provides translation. That itself makes such a big difference, not only for people who have hearing problems, but for me, because now I can have any senses that I can try it on. You know, if I choose to read a document or listen to a podcast, it makes a lot of difference to my mental health and how I maintain energy on that basis. At the same time is, of course, when we send people home to work, people struggles because we provide the accessibility equipments in the office. What happens now? Within 3 days, everybody is back at home working. So we set up an example, a number that you call direct. If you have got disability question, it doesn't go into a chatbot at that point. It goes through a true consultant who asks you questions and then recommend what you do. And we work together in a forum that we call workplace accessibility to make sure that we get equipment to people who needs it. And that means that, we got to adjust suppliers, we got to adjust procurement timeline, change our policies, because previously it's only easy. Everybody comes to office. Now that you're at home, so are the company going to pay? What are they going to pay? Simple things, but it makes a lot of difference on that. And at the same time is we are very happy to also have more suppliers working with us to address that problem, because now there's definitely a market for it on that basis.
Wow. Really impressive that you put a phone line in place for people to call. That's really forward thinking. I love that. Pilar, share some of your thoughts in this space.
It's fascinating to hear Alisa and Cristina talk about their experiences and how amazing companies like theirs are taking those decisions to adapt, to be more accessible and to be more inclusive. And I think it's fascinating because, COVID, and I think it still continues impacting how we interact with each other. And demographics of people with disabilities have increased due to the pandemic. Think of the indirect impact on mental health, or think of the long COVID consequences. So, this is the time to take decisions, for companies to take decisions on how the new hybrid, how the new work life model is going to be in their companies. And it's great to hear those experiences. And for me, It is the time to include people, to be more inclusive, to include people with disabilities, but it's also the time to think of the business advantage. And in Microsoft, we talk about disability as a strength, and we really mean it. And we really mean it when we hear the stories like how we can make our companies more accessible by design for people with disabilities and for everyone. And of course, how can we make our products and services more accessible? And that is something that we prioritize at Microsoft. I think it's also a priority, or should be a priority for almost every company. Thinking of the market potential of making your products and services more accessible for people with disabilities and for everyone. To me, that's perhaps one of the best possible stories of best possible consequences of COVID. And I believe a lot in that. And I'm hearing already those experiences from our colleagues in the panel, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly one of those things, isn't it? You hear more and more people now talking about inclusive design, but it's not just the talking, it's the action that we need, and the kind of the living it and moving to that kind of more progressive kind of way of planning from the outset. So yeah, I certainly think you're right. This has certainly accelerated or helped that cause, at least in the conversation, but conversation's never enough. Let's talk about employee voice a little bit, and the role that execs can play in amplifying that employee voice and challenging the perceptions of disability. I'm a co-chair of an ERG at Channel 4. We have a number of ERGs, and that network collectively is really strong, and it's certainly one way of having a very open dialogue with our executive team. But it'd be great to hear some thoughts that you might have in this area. Alisa, shall I start with you?
Well, it's a pleasure. I think basically ours is tone from the top. In 2019, the Shell CEO signed the valuable 500. Shortly after that, in 2020, the group CIO signed the Accessibility Technology Charter. Yeah. So basically, we are on the way. But even way before that, we have been doing work in these areas. This year, 2 of the directors basically are put out as champion of disability. They have made videos and they have talked about it very much so. So for example, this year we ran a user accessibility camp and hackathon. Yeah, basically it's something that something that the group came up and says, let's do something. We have 25 teams, making up of maybe 5 to 10 people globally who participated. So they came up with beautiful innovation ideas on that basis. And with that, the thing is they get to actually present to the 2 directors. So that gave them visibility, and it amplified those messages more than anything else. Yeah. My retail executive vice president, he's really forward thinking. He's saying that, okay, we got something that is called a Shell app. Yeah, when you go to the retail station, it tells you that. So what we also designed is in the fuel service app, if you got disability, you can tell people, I'm coming to your retail station, okay, and what help you need. So when you drive up to the food court, you get the help you need and you can pay in your car. So things like that is an example that is not only used by people with disability, but think about it. If you are a mother with a young child at the back, that will also be brilliant because you don't need to get up from a car. So to me is whatever we do, there's a bit more persona around it. But the role of leaders is really fascinating, because if the leader has passion on the topic, it will be amplified around the organization on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think if you've got a leader that has conviction, you're onto a winning streak for sure. Pilar, share some of your thoughts about all this.
Yeah, I think you say it super well. It's the leading by example, that is so critical here. The role of executive sponsorship in creating diverse workforce, the inclusive workforce, and the focus on accessibility just makes a complete difference. We have in Microsoft, we created this concept of the employee resource groups, and we secured executive sponsorship for every one of those groups on the diversity and inclusion full spectrum. I personally am the sponsor for accessibility in the Western Europe area team. And I'm proud to bring people together to work for a more accessible culture and for a more accessible set of products and services. When it gets to action, and Corie, I think you challenge us on action, like talking about it, but what can we do about it? Yeah. For me, there are a few things that make a big difference from an executive sponsorship perspective. I think the first one has to do with the inclusive hiring. Let's take action on that one. How do we make sure that we have succession plans that include diverse candidates and that include people with different backgrounds, but also people with disabilities? That start making a big difference. What about the role of the ecosystem? That would be for me we are not alone on this one. It's not Microsoft only. What about the ecosystem? If I think Western Europe, more than 70,000 partners in the ecosystem, companies, IT companies in the ecosystem have signed our what we call our partner pledge, that include this commitment to accessibility as part of the pledge. Or what about working with our customers to make sure that also their products and services can become more accessible? So all of those themes, again, leading by example and making sure that we take action. It's not only talking about it, it's also putting plans in place to make the world a more accessible place.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all of that, for sure. Cristina, Alisa and Pilar have said a lot in this area already. I'm not sure, do you have anything that you would add around the role of the exec in all this?
Maybe just a little build. I think as executive, it's critical to make disability and accessibility part of the regular conversation. I've seen how much, for instance, on another big theme like sustainability, having clear commitment being taken from leaders as put the topic on the agenda on regular basis. I think as executive, one of the critical things that we can do is truly making it part of the big subjects we speak about, and with the also intention of listening to people's story and to individual story, because every story is different. One of the points that Alisa was mentioning about what about a mommy with a children going to the gas station, it made me think a lot about the fact that when we speak about disability, we are looking at a wide range of people being impacted. And I think as leaders, it's important to move out from the misconception that this is something impacting a few people in our organization. It's actually impacting many people in our organizations. If we think about the fact that it can be also a situational type of disability. If you think about, having a child on your arms and not being able to type, this is a scenario with parents working from home that we have seen every day in our teams. So the ability to leverage on technology for dictating what you have to write can make a difference. So it's impacting many people. And as executive, if we could solve it for one, then there are many out there that are maybe not speaking out loud that can benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. You are absolutely so right. We've touched on accessibility in a lot of this conversation already, but I think it'd be really great if we could have a bit of a chat about how we invest in accessibility and building digital skills in the workplace. Alisa, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, actually, I'm very privileged because of my position and my role. I'm actually championing IT accessibility standard in the company.
Wow.
So basically, we have a set of IT accessibility standard. And together with Shell brand, is now into our own toolkit. So you can check that your document is actually inclusive. That means don't use white font against a pastel background. Nobody, even with good eyesight, can see it. Things like that could be very simple, but it's really, really powerful. So when you have built those things, communicate it and get people to do it. In our own executive group, we also have targets. How many of your webcast slides, IT accessibility enabled? Do you have caption? Do you have translation once your webcast is completed? So those are the targets that we set for ourselves, which I think is changing a bit, but we still have a long way to go. And we also have our architecture designs. In everything that we develop, the IT accessibility standard needs to be included. If there's a step up required, the chief architect needs to sign it off. So again, start from the right thing. And like you say, the design needs to be there on that basis. And then we also have got things like, make sure that in coding best practices that we publish out, we also call out, included in there is accessibility coding. Make sure you check on that, and that's how you get more reward points if you do it right first time as well. And what is important is we constantly train our project manager and business analysts. Okay, these are the IT accessibility standard. Get it into your design. When we do a project review, make sure this is being checked on. So it started off a bit of a pull in the beginning, and now that it gets in to be a momentum, everybody just thinks, hey, that's the right thing to do. And we was like, why was it not the right thing to do in the beginning? It's because of awareness. It all starts with awareness, like I say, starts with one voice, but when the voice gets on, it really, really makes an impact on that one. We are able to also do this and pull it into the Shell strategy. Well, the whole thing about Shell strategy, we focus in 4 pillars, and one of the pillars is powering lives. And powering lives talk about inclusion. So when you can then pull how we work and relate to our strategy, everybody then comes aboard with you. So we have started. I'm not saying we are there yet, but we have done great work over the last 2 years.
It sounds like you've done absolutely amazing work over the last, if that's only over 2 years, that's really incredible. I mean, just hearing about the processes, it sort of sounds so robust, and I'm in awe, actually. I think there's a lot of lessons we could learn at Channel 4, for sure. We're doing much better than we were, but process is still one of those things that, it's not that sexy, really, is it? Cristina, let me come to you. Do you have some thoughts to share in this area?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The one of the key things that I believe it's making a difference for us in driving this conversation in Nestle is the fact that we have a strong partnership with a couple of important functions like HR. We have an HR officer dedicated to diversity and inclusion, and the particular attention with our communication team, which makes the ability for driving the topic not only an IT subject, but truly a company-wide type of conversation. From an IT perspective, I have the pleasure and the challenge to be the one having the accountability for delivering technology to around 270,000 Nestle employees around the world. So if my art is close to accessibility, I guess you can guess why. And we do it in different ways. I recognize some of the point Alisa was mentioning about making it embedded by design in our processes. We went as far as having some elements regarding formal certification on some of our technology elements with regards of disability and accessibility. But we are doing also a lot of work in fostering conversation, creating opportunity for discussion at the pace and at the level of exposure people do find right for them, respecting the fact that people might be at a different level of comfort in sharing how they stand with regards of disability and accessibility. So there are vast amount of information being available in terms of knowledge sharing, conversational groups, training, design, tutorial, insight sessions, so that everyone can find a way that feels right for you as an individual or for you as a team to consume that at your own pace. And definitely for our IT communities and organization, a lot of training, a lot of empowering, and a lot of good challenges coming from our UX and UI people to be sure that it gets embedded from the start, it gets embedded from the very beginning and not as an afterthought.
Yeah, there we go with that message again. Think about it right from the get-go. And I think if you do it, it clearly helps with that whole perception of disability, I think, because, disability is still seen as that kind of problem child because it is needing the fixes to go in later. So if everybody's thinking about stuff right from the beginning and it's embedded into process, then we're onto an absolute winning track. Completely agree with all of this. Pilar, what would you like to add?
I think I need to add and provide the reassurance on that inclusive design that we've been talking about and my colleagues have been describing, on coming from the technology they use and playing such a critical role for digital skilling across their organizations and across their ecosystems. And just reassuring on that, from the Microsoft perspective, our teams are including colleagues, my colleagues with disabilities, designing those products and making sure that they are inclusive by design. And I think we often hear from the disability community, nothing about us without us. Well, that's exactly what we are trying to do. And my personal experience here is I joined Microsoft at the time when we were launching Windows 10, and a few weeks ago we just saw the launch of Windows 11, and it was great to see a number of capabilities, number of functionalities, providing a better experience for people with or without disability, a better experience for people. We never know what the context is or what the situation is. So it was great to hear about voice typing, available now in many more European languages, available in Dutch, in Swedish, Danish, Finnish, Norwegian. So continue working on from that aspect and reassuring the ecosystem and reassuring. In fact, to be bold, the students and citizens across European countries on how digital technology will become more and more accessible for them to be able to change the world with technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get in, because what Pilar says is very important. A lot of times as technologists, we think that, this is what someone will want. But more importantly, we got to listen. Yeah? We actually got to listen to the people. What exactly do they want? It's not us being technology smart and pushing out things down there. So in Shell, we have what we call an enable network. So they exist in many countries. The first thing I did was each enable network, I make sure there's an IT champion there. So from there, they will tell us what are some of the challenges, and their problems. And then from there, we come up with a roadmap that says, what is it that we want to address? So again, it's constantly engaging, listening with a user centricity in mind helps a lot. So I do not want to push out technology, but I want to push out solutions that help the needs. Or else we are just doing technology smart, and it doesn't work that way. So I'll give you an example. Our service now, which is a product catalog, says, okay, ask for a headset, ask for this item, ask for that item, ask for that item. It's a pain. I just want to have a persona. If I have visually impaired, here's a list of things I need, okay? And press one button. So that is going to be more powerful when asking people, ask for 5 things. Okay, and the 5 things doesn't integrate together, then we end up not having a good user experience. So the continual engagement, making sure that we place the people in the center is going to be the big conversation here.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it kind of underlines that message about how important it is to have a diverse workforce in the first place. You know, we all know that it impacts the bottom line. And I think that is absolutely a classic example of how those diverse perspectives can really come into play in a really positive way. So thank you for sharing that. I'm really conscious of time, but before we finish, I would love to hear from each of you about your ambition for your business around accessibility and disability inclusion. So whether this is like next steps or, you know, real pipe dream kind of stuff, what do you see coming down the tracks or hope to see coming down the tracks? Shall I start with you, Pilar?
Thank you. It's all about the culture. It's all about diversity and inclusion at the heart of our culture, and how do we evolve the culture every day, and that will get us there also from an accessibility perspective.
Alisa?
I think I will start with, I'm very proud that the board and my executive committee has put powering lives into the strategy. Yeah? Powering lives is actually about, through our products and our activities, how do we support a more inclusive society? So with that mantra coming up there on that, we basically, everything that we do, we need to link it back to this particular pillar of the strategy, just like everything else. I think what I'm looking forward to is a tighter connection with our user group. They feel more comfortable to give feedback, more comfortable to be vulnerable, because if they don't, I can't address that problem as well. Okay, and make sure that we partner with them to get the right solution. I'm looking for, more technology that can be integrated together with MS Teams, for example, because it's not one product, it's multiple products that needs to get together to give you a better experience. I'm looking forward to improve the IT support chat box. They can also address accessibility questions on that, and also trying to work with suppliers to shorten the procurement time of some of the equipments that I need and getting it to the countries that is not easy to get into. Because in cities it's easy, but if you are in Karachi, it's going to be a bit difficult for me to get the same standard of equipment in. So working the supply chain is really important on that. And of course, partnering with my VP of D&I and my VP of Health, Real Estate, to really push this agenda through.
Wow, you've got a busy time ahead of you for sure. Sounds really, really exciting there.
We all are. We all are. Yeah, the whole group is very energized about this topic. You will be unbelievable about it.
It makes such a difference, though, doesn't it? When you have that energy around you, I think that just kind of it's the first kind of it's like the magic juice in the winning formula.
So can you imagine? In October, we're already planning what we are going to do next year.
Wow!
To me, that's a wow, because they're going to get off in January running. To me, so again, that passion is what you need. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
For sure. Cristina, any closing words from you?
Yeah, so Nestle summarizes its vision with good food, good life, and in this good life, I believe there is a lot that we can be doing with regards of making for our consumers and for our employees, the accessibility and disability element, something that is part of our future. For me, the big thing on the horizon, it's the big challenge coming in terms of rethinking how the new hybrid world is going to look like, and how the digital workplace and the physical workplace are getting together in a new way. It's a unique opportunity for accelerating the journey. I think one drop of wisdom from my side, we need to be honest on where we are. I'm amazed to hear what Alisa is doing in Shell. I've been taking mental notes on things I want to bring back to my team. There are also things that we are doing. Alisa, if you want to talk about the chatbot for the help desk, there is something we are doing on that space. But truly be honest in terms of where you are, and pick your priorities in terms of where you think you can really make a difference. In that, I think the design of the hybrid digital and physical workplace right now, it's a huge opportunity we all are confronted with. Every big organization is looking into that. And I think this is something where we can truly move the bar in making our workplaces a way more accessible environment for all our people.
Wow, it's really great to hear all that. Ladies, unfortunately, I think we're probably out of time, so I'm not going to lob any more questions your way, but thank you so much for all your insights, and just the energy and the passion in this space is just really so invigorating, and I could sit and chat here for hours probably, but I think we need to draw a line under it now. So Alisa, Cristina and Pilar, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Corie.
Thank you, Corie.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Corie. And
thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Alisa.
Thank you.
Cristina. Good to see you. Bye.
Wow, wasn't that fantastic? As Corie said, that the passion and the interest in this area just exuded off of that group, and so brilliant to see so much sort of practical activity and action going on in those organisations, and that connection between the people on the panel was easy to see how much they wanted to talk to each other and connect up, and I know they're going to continue to make those connections now that we've joined them up that way. And a huge thank you to Corie as well, who's a big supporter of TechShare Pro and been helping us for some time. So that's the end of the keynote for this morning. We have another keynote this evening at 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock UK time. We've got some amazing sessions then, not least Phil Spencer, head of Xbox, talking to Rob Riley from WPP, and Cindy Rose, President for Western Europe for Microsoft. That's a jewel in the crown this evening, so I hope you can join us for that. A reminder that everything that you're watching is recorded. If you're watching from the stream, then the sessions you've been watching, the keynote session this morning and all the other keynote sessions, are recorded and will be available to you. If you're inside the conference platform, those sessions are also recorded and available, but so are all the other sessions that you're going to be attending over the next 3 days. So if you're not able to make something, you will be able to watch it back later. A lot of the sessions are running as Teams meetings. We're deliberately doing that to encourage people to interact with the sessions. We've had some questions today in this session here, and we've taken a note of all those, and those will be answered. We're not answering them live in the keynote, but they will be answered afterwards. We've got a record of all those chats, so if you have any questions at any time during the sessions, for anybody who's involved in any of the keynote sessions, we will do our best to get those questions to them and get them answered for you. We've also got some housekeeping stuff, so lunchtime coming up. There are sessions running you can find in the program, some lunch and learn workshops. There's also lots of speed networking available. If you haven't tried the speed networking yet, excuse me, up to 10 people can join in spontaneously, put your name in the queue, you join a room full of people. It's great. Tried it a couple of times this morning. So please join in with those things, and we'll see you later on. Thank you.